In a world defined by dragons, ancient bloodlines, and prophetic destinies, few characters cast a shadow as long as Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning. A man revered in both legend and memory, Arthur is remembered not just for his peerless swordsmanship, but for what he represents: honor, loyalty, mystery, and the fading ideal of the true knight. But to understand Arthur Dayne, we must first understand the house from which he hails, House Dayne of Starfall. Unlike many noble families in Westeros, the Daynes are wrapped in enigma with roots set to stretch back to the very dawn of days. Their ancestral sword, Dawn, is no ordinary weapon. Forged from the heart of a fallen star, it glows with a pale light, ancient and powerful, a weapon whispered to rival Valyrian steel. Yet Dawn is not simply passed down by birthright. It must be earned, and only those deemed worthy are granted the title Sword of the Morning. Arthur Dayne was the last known wielder of this fabled blade, but his story is not just one of heroism and duels. His legacy is tied to some of the most significant and controversial events in the history of Westeros: the fall of the Targaryens, the prophecy of Azor Ahai, and the hidden truths of the Tower of Joy. His loyalty to Prince Rhaegar, his silence in the face of madness, and his mysterious final stand raise questions that echo through the series. It is the story of a man who might have known the truth of everything and died with it. This is the story of Arthur Dayne. In order to understand Arthur Dayne, we must first talk about his family and the house that he originates from. Arthur was younger brother of unnamed Lord Dayne and uncle of current Lord Dayne, Edric Dayne. He also had two sisters, Ashara and Illyria. Arthur Dayne hails from a castle named Starfall in Dorne, which is under the ownership of House Dayne. A Song of Ice and Fire is full of mysterious houses. We have Targaryens with the blood of old Valyria, Starks who apparently have secret connections with the others, Blackwoods who seem to have the blood of the first men, which enables them to have Greenseer abilities, but the house that is equally shrouded in mystery is House Dayne. The main element of this house is Starfall, their castle. Built on an island in the summer sea where the river Torrentine enters the sea. The site was chosen because it is a place where a shooting star fell into the ground. Dawn, the legendary sword of Danes. Forged from the heart of the fallen star, a stone of magical powers, legend says. Described as pale as milk glass, alive with light in a Game of Thrones book. Even after many years, it seems to always be strong and sharp. Sword of the Morning, the title given to the wielder of the sword, Dawn, that can only be a knight of House Dayne who is deemed worthy to carry it, and their purple-violet eyes with blonde hair, even if the family is not descended at all from Valyrian blood. This was confirmed by George R.R. Martin himself. They do share some of their charming characteristics. We do know that the Danes have existed for 10,000 years to the dawn of days, as said by Gerald Dane in A Feast for Crows. This is confirmed also in the World of Ice and Fire book, since it is stated that the Danes are a house with the blood of the first men. In this book, the legend says, the first Dane was led to the site where Starfall is now built when he followed the track of a falling star, and there found a stone of magical powers. This implies that both Starfall and Dawn date back to the Dawn Age, which occurred before the Long Night, since it was the first Dane who chose the location for Starfall and discovered the stone from which Dawn was forged. The sword and the castle are both ancient. However, there is a small issue here. A World of Ice and Fire does not strictly depict a medieval age world, as we've observed the evolution of architecture, metallurgy, and other technologies. Sometimes the singers adapt legends from the Age of Heroes to the present era. For example, the story of Serwyn of the Mirror Shield describes him as a member of the Kingsguard, an institution only founded during the Targaryen reign, despite Serwyn having lived in the time of the First Men. So Starfall likely wasn't built as a complete castle from the start, but evolved over time, just as we've seen with King's Landing. The problem lies with the sword. The first men had bronze swords and lacked advanced metallurgical knowledge. It was the Andals who brought iron working to Westeros, and the Rhoynar who later spread steel working techniques. This makes it highly unusual that the Danes, during the time of the First Men, were capable of forging a weapon like Dawn, often compared to Valyrian steel in sharpness and quality. To address this inconsistency, there are two possible explanations. 1. Magical forging. In the current timeline, George R.R. Martin uses magic sparingly, but it appears that in ancient times magic was more powerful and prevalent. Since the heart of the fallen star was imbued with magical powers, it's plausible that the creation of the sword involved magical means, much like the forging of Valyrian steel. Or 2. A mysterious ancestry. A more speculative theory is that the Danes, based on their Valyrian-like features, may have had contact with or descended from an ancient people such as the Ashai or Proto-Valyrians. There are cryptic clues suggesting that an ancient race traveled the world, teaching the Valyrians to tame dragons or building great square fortresses of oily black stone. These people could have possessed the knowledge to forge a sword like Dawn. If this second theory is true, I like to imagine that Dawn's design predates the more familiar cruciform hilts, which appeared much later. Its appearance would likely reflect a more ancient style. There's also a compelling possibility that Dawn is Lightbringer, the legendary sword used during the First Long Night. The name Dawn isn't strongly tied to falling star imagery, and the title Sword of the Morning seems more closely associated with bringing back the light after the long night than with celestial themes. This could suggest that Dawn was the original Lightbringer. If so, after the Battle of the Dawn, many would have coveted such a sword. To protect it, should the long night return, it may have been wise to obscure its identity. Thus, the legend of a red sword of heroes might have been spread to mislead others, while only the Danes knew the truth and safeguarded the sword in secrecy. Dawn plays a vital role in the history of House Dayne. It appears on their family sigil, and as mentioned earlier, legend claims that the first Dane raised Starfall on an island at the south of the Torrentine River, guided by a falling star. His descendants became kings of the Torrentine and lords of Starfall. Alongside the Fowlers and Ironwoods, the Danes were one of the most powerful and prestigious houses in ancient Dorne. Dawn's uniqueness goes beyond its origins. In the A Song of Ice and Fire universe, ancestral swords are typically passed from lord to lord, unless lost, stolen, or given to a bastard by an unworthy king. Dawn is the exception. It is not given to just anyone, not even to the head of the house. To wield Dawn, a Dane must prove themselves worthy. They are then granted the title Sword of the Morning, an honor bestowed only rarely. If no knight of House Dayne is deemed worthy, the sword remains dormant. Throughout history, there have been 3 known Swords of the Morning. Sir Davos Dayne, who married Princess Nymeria and became Prince Consort of Dorne. Ulrich Dayne, who lived during the Blackfyre rebellions and was said to rival Daemon Blackfyre and Aemon the Dragon Knight. And the most famous, Sir Arthur Dayne. Arthur Dayne's reputation in the fandom reflects his renown in the world of Westeros. Even those uninterested in tales of knights know his name. There was Arthur Dayne, Arya remembered. The one they call the Sword of the Morning. There was Arthur Dayne, Marcella said. He was a knight of the Kingsguard in the days of Mad King Aerys. The Sword of the Morning, said Dany, delighted. Viserys used to talk about his wondrous white blade. He said Sir Arthur was the only knight in the realm who was our brother's peer. Gerald Dayne scoffed. My house goes back 10,000 years unto the dawn of days. Why is it that my cousin is the only Dane that anyone remembers? One of Arthur's most notable deeds as a Kingsguard was leading the mission to defeat the Kingswood Brotherhood, an outlaw band that terrorized the realm. The Brotherhood was so popular with the small folk that the royal forces struggled to locate them. Arthur Dayne earned the villagers' trust. He appealed to King Aerys to improve their rights and ensured they were compensated for goods taken by soldiers. According to Jaime Lannister, if you want their help, you need to make them love you. That was how Arthur Dayne did it. He paid the small folk for food, brought their grievances to King Aerys, expanded grazing lands, and gave them hunting rights. The forest folk had looked to Toyne to protect them, but Sir Arthur did more. Arthur eventually slew the Smiling Knight in one of the most famous duels in Westeros. This is how Jaime remembers Arthur defeating the Smiling Knight. Sir Gerald might have written a few more words about the deeds he'd performed when Sir Arthur Dayne broke the Kingswood Brotherhood. He had saved Lord Sommer's life as Big Belly Ben was about to smash his head in, though the outlaw had escaped him, and he'd held his own against the Smiling Knight, though it was Sir Arthur who slew him. What a fight that was, and what a foe. The Smiling Knight was a madman, cruelty and chivalry all jumbled up together, but he did not know the meaning of fear. And Dayne, with dawn in hand, the outlaw's longsword had so many notches by the end of that Sir Arthur had stopped to let him fetch a new one. "It's that white sword of yours I want," the robber knight told him, as they resumed, though he was bleeding from a dozen wounds by then. "Then you shall have it, sir," the Sword of the Morning replied, and made an end of it. Later, after cleaning the Smiling Knight's blood off of Dawn, Arthur knighted Jaime, who would go on to become his sworn brother in the Kingsguard. Jaime often reflects on this day and thinks back on it. That boy had wanted to be Sir Arthur Dayne, but someplace along the way he had become the Smiling Knight instead. Jaime's thoughts on himself. Probably the most controversial aspect of Arthur Dayne was his role as Kingsguard. If Arthur Dayne had been presented as the quintessential chivalrous knight, how could he support the atrocities of Aerys that even Jaime was horrified by? George R.R. Martin himself said that we don't have the full picture. Actually, it's a stark contrast to be a true knight and be at the service of Mad King Aerys. The matter is raised up even in the text, without giving a definitive answer on how to manage the controversial situation a Kingsguard might find himself into. The sight had filled him with disquiet, reminding him of Aerys Targaryen and the way a burning would arouse him. A king has no secrets from his Kingsguard. Relations between Aerys and his queen had been strained during the last years of his reign. They slept apart and did their best to avoid each other during the waking hours. But whenever Aerys gave a man to the flames, Queen Rhaella would have a visitor in the night. The day he burned his mace and dagger hand, Jaime and John Derry had stood at guard, outside her bedchamber whilst the king took his pleasure. "You're hurting me," they had heard Rhaella cry through the oaken door. "You're hurting me," in some queer way that had been worse than Lord Chelstead's screaming. "We are sworn to protect her as well," Jaime had finally been driven to say. "We are," Derry allowed, "but not from him." The question we are asking about Sir Arthur is the same Catelyn asked the Kingslayer. How can you still count yourself a knight when you have forsaken every vow you ever swore? Jaime reached for the flagon to refill his cup. So many vows. They make you swear and swear. Defend the king, obey the king, keep his secrets, do his bidding, your life for his. But obey your father, love your sister, protect the innocent, defend the weak, respect the gods, obey the laws. It's too much. No matter what you do, you're forsaking one vow or the other. The answer Jaime gave fully reflects the style of George Martin. This is not a fantasy where good and evil are well defined. Characters are gray. Arthur had a chivalrous rivalry with Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. He was the champion in the tournament in honor of Viserys' birth in 276 AC, defeating Rhaegar. In another tourney, Arthur broke 12 lances against Rhaegar, losing to the prince. At the tourney at Harrenhal in 281 AC, he was defeated by Rhaegar once again. Despite their rivalry, Arthur is regarded as the closest and oldest friend of Rhaegar. George R.R. Martin probably is hinting at something about the changes Rhaegar wanted to make about his father. And let's not forget that Arthur Dayne was Rhaegar's best friend, so they probably were aligned on the same agenda. We must visit a Feast for Crows where we can see the last interaction between Jaime and Rhaegar. Rhaegar had put his hand on Jaime's shoulder. "When this battle's done, I mean to call a council. Changes will be made. I meant to do it long ago, but, well, it does no good to speak of roads not taken. We shall talk when I return." Arthur Dayne knew from Rhaegar what was the plan, so he probably didn't do anything to oppose Aerys in his actions because he was waiting for Rhaegar to make his move. In the years before the rebellion, Aerys' court was divided into people who supported the Mad King and people who preferred his son, Prince Rhaegar. It's hinted that Rhaegar planned to overthrow his mad father and make himself king. This was the reason why the tourney at Harrenhal was held in the first place. It was set up so Rhaegar could meet with all the lords and noble highborns at the same time to discuss the future of the reign. Oswell Went was a member of the Kingsguard, and his brother was lord at Harrenhal. Oswell knew how mad the king was, and was one of the people urging Rhaegar to step in and rule. Oswell arranged with his brother to host the tourney at Harrenhal. It was the perfect opportunity. However, everything went wrong. King Aerys, who rarely left King's Landing, attended. Since Duskendale, the king would have never went, but Varys told him what Rhaegar was planning, so the king was there. The Mystery Knight appears. Rhaegar gives the crown of love and beauty to Lyanna, the disappearances happen, and all the rest. The original plan was not for Rhaegar to depose King Aerys, but for Rhaegar to rule as regent until Aerys died. Aerys would be detained and watched somewhere until his death. And the World of Ice and Fire says that in this political conflict, Rhaegar's most formidable ally was Arthur Dayne. It is no wonder that Arthur would side with Rhaegar, since he was on the Kingsguard for Aerys Targaryen, the cruel and terrible Mad King. Alongside Jaime, Arthur must have stood and watched while Aerys burned innocent people alive. Also, because of the fact that Arthur was Prince Rhaegar's closest friend, Rhaegar trusted him with his secrets. And Rhaegar had big secrets. Rhaegar was obsessed with the prophecy of Azor Ahai, a hero prophesied to be reborn and save the world. Rhaegar believed that his son would be Azor Ahai, along with 2 siblings. But Rhaegar's wife, Elia, couldn't have any more children, so it seems that part of why Rhaegar ran off with Lyanna and had baby Jon Snow was to fulfill the Azor Ahai prophecy. And as Rhaegar's oldest trusted friend, Arthur probably knew all of this. He was with Rhaegar and Lyanna when they went to the tower, and apparently stayed with them for months. When Robert started the war and Rhaegar went to fight him, Arthur and the Kingsguard didn't go guard the king. They stayed with Lyanna and her unborn son, presumably under Rhaegar's orders. Because Arthur was loyal to Rhaegar's prophetic mission, and loyal to Rhaegar's son, the future heir to the Targaryen dynasty, and possibly the future savior of the world. But when Rhaegar died, and Robert beat the Targaryens, the Kingsguard were in an awkward situation. They were stuck in a tower in Dorne, and Lyanna was pregnant with Rhaegar's heir, but they had no allies left. Their side had lost. So, now what? In Book 1, Ned Stark dreams of the Tower of Joy. In the dream, his friends rode with him as they had in life. Proud Martin Cassell, Jory's father, faithful Theo Wool, Ethan Glover, who had been Brandon's squire, Sir Mark Riswell, soft of speech and gentle of heart, the Crannogman, Howland Reed, Lord Dustin on his great red stallion. Ned had known their faces as well as he knew his own once, but the years leech at a man's memories, even those he has vowed never to forget. In the dream they were only shadows, grey wraiths on horses made of mist. They were 7 facing 3, in the dream as it had been in life. Yet these were no ordinary 3. They waited before the round tower, the red mountains of Dorne at their backs, their white cloaks blowing in the wind. And these were no shadows, their faces burned clear even now. Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, had a smile on his lips. The hilt of the greatsword Dawn poked up over his right shoulder. Sir Oswell Whent was on one knee, sharpening his blade with a whetstone. Across his white enameled helm, the black bat of his house spread its wings. Between them stood fierce old Sir Gerald Hightower, the White Bull, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. "I looked for you on the Trident," Ned said to them. "We were not there," Sir Gerald answered. "Woe to the usurper if we had been," said Sir Oswell. "When King's Landing fell, Sir Jaime slew your king with the golden sword, and I wondered where you were." "Far away," Sir Gerald said. "Or Aerys would yet sit on the Iron Throne, and our false brother would burn in 7 hells." "I came down on Storm's End to lift the siege," Ned told them, "and the Lords Tyrell and Redwyne dipped their banners, and all their knights bent the knee to pledge us fealty. I was certain you would be among them." "Our knees do not bend easily," said Sir Arthur Dayne. "Sir Willem Darry is fled to Dragonstone with your queen and Prince Viserys. I thought you might have sailed with him." "Sir Willem is a good man and true," said Sir Oswell, "but not of the Kingsguard," Sir Gerald pointed out. "The Kingsguard does not flee." "Then or now," said Sir Arthur. He donned his helm. "We swore a vow," explained old Sir Gerald. Ned's wraiths moved up beside him, with shadow swords in hand. They were 7 against 3. "And now it begins," said Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning. He unsheathed Dawn and held it with both hands. The blade was pale as milk glass, alive with light. "No," Ned said with sadness in his voice. "Now it ends." As they came together in a rush of steel and shadow, he could hear Lyanna screaming. "Eddard," she called. The storm of rose petals blew across a blood-streaked sky, as blue as the eyes of death. It is one of the most important and mysterious battles in the whole series. All Ned wanted was to protect Lyanna and her baby, and the Kingsguard wanted the same, so you'd think Ned and the Kingsguard could have come to some agreement. Some fans speculate that Arthur faked his own death and is still alive somewhere, maybe as Mance Rayder, but there is no solid evidence. Everything we know about Arthur shows he's a man of absolute loyalty and duty. "All knights must bleed," he said. "Blood is the seal of our devotion." And so Arthur bled. His noble, inflexible honor led to his death. Even though we already know that in the battle near the Tower of Joy, it was 3 of the Kingsguard who were defeated by Ned and 6 of his friends. How the Kingsguard were defeated is still a mystery. Even though it was 7 against 3, the skill gap between the parties should be high. Ned's biggest feat and source of his combat influence comes from his battle with Arthur Dayne. It becomes the main reason why Jaime wants to test his abilities with Ned in the first place. Everyone believes that Ned defeated Arthur, and therefore Ned should be in the same league as him. However, there is only a single person beside Ned who knows how he actually defeated Arthur. In Book 1, he tells Bran that he defeated Arthur via the help of Howland Reed. In the TV show, we see how this battle goes down. Arthur, Ned, and Howland are the only ones left from the fighting, and it looks like Arthur had the upper hand. However, in the last minute, before he can defeat Ned, he is attacked by Howland from behind, thus saving Ned from certain death. However, in the books, this fighting will most likely go in a different route. We know for certain that Howland will beat him, but we do not know how. We know that in the books, after Howland reached the age of majority, he sought additional knowledge. He boldly paddled a small skin boat down the Green Fork, evaded the twins at night, and visited the Isle of Faces in search of the Green Men. He stayed at the island all winter. His children definitely have some kind of magical abilities such as green sight, so I think the most logical and possible way for Ned and Howland to defeat the greatest knight in the realm could be that Howland warged into Arthur, thus distracting and staggering him, which gave Ned enough time to finish the night. The noble knight failed his Prince Rhaegar and his king Aerys, but Arthur's death still has meaning. Part of the prophecy of Azor Ahai is that he'll be reborn beneath a bleeding star. Arthur's sigil is a star, and he bleeds as Jon is born. The TV show highlights this, putting the star-forged sword Dawn against the bloody bed where Jon is born. The magic of Azor Ahai is all about sacrifice, and as Arthur Dayne dies, Jon Snow is born, a new heroic warrior to bring the dawn. After that, Eddard traveled to Starfall to return Arthur's greatsword Dawn to House Dayne. As a sign of respect towards Arthur, however, sometime after his visit, Ashara jumped from the top of the Palestone Sword, one of the towers of Starfall, into the sea. Several characters have cited possible reasons for Ashara's decision to commit suicide. A broken heart, because of a stolen child, for the man who had dishonored her at Harrenhal, or due to grief over Arthur's death. Even though Ned and Arthur were enemies up until the latter one's death, Ned never ever thinks back on Arthur negatively, and throughout Westeros, he is remembered as not only a skilled fighter, but a valiant and true knight.